This episode has been brought to you by DiceyGoblin.com, online board game retailer, where every board game is an award-winning board game. Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we'll bring you the how to play video for Manuscripts. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time up front, just want to get right into the rules. So as we start, I'm going to be showing you the two-player layout for the boards. In the back of the rulebook, you'll find multiple layouts for how you can do different player counts. Basically, what you need to know is you're going to have one of these tiles, one of these modular boards per player. So let's get into the rest of the rules. Next, you'll take a number of manuscripts equal to the number of players and place one on each tile. In this case, I've got science and art. Doesn't matter that the actual manuscripts have no effect on the gameplay. What you're going to do is make sure that they are at least 6 spaces from the entrance. What I like to do is place them the same way as I place the monsters. Instead of me choosing where they're going to go, I actually roll these dice. And you'll see how these work with the monsters in a minute, but basically you have a black arrow here, or a darker arrow, and a lighter arrow. The yellow die goes with the lighter arrow, the black one goes with the darker. And so I like to roll these, and you can see here it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with the yellow, and then 1, 2 with the black. And so the manuscript would go right there, and that is in fact 6 spaces or more from this entrance. And then you do the same thing with the other side. And again, this is not a part of the official rules, it's just how I've chosen, because players are allowed to put the manuscripts wherever they want on the board. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, or actually I would be counting from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one will go down here. And then you double check, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is 6 or more spaces away from the entrance. And so the manuscripts are now on the board. Next, you're going to take 3 jewels for one board and 2 for every other board, and you're going to place them on the boards. As far as which board gets the 3 and which gets the 2, again, you can determine that yourself. For me, I choose the board with the wizard space right here as also having 3 jewels, but that's just personal preference, and how you place them out is also personal preference. Again, the way I do it is with the dice, so give me a moment and I will set these out. So there you go, the jewels are now spread out on the board, and keep in mind the color has no effect on the gameplay. They all are of equal value. Next, players will choose a team of princess, warrior, and wizard based on color. So I'll choose red for player 1, and player 2 will have the green. Next, separate the cards into monster, manuscript, and spell decks. Provide each player with a player sheet. Remove the 2 manuscripts that are currently on the board, in this case science and art, and then remove the rest from the game. Shuffle these manuscript cards up, and then each player gets 1. In the case of a 2-player game, obviously you're going to know which manuscript the other player is looking for. However, in a multiplayer game, having multiple manuscripts hidden means that you don't know exactly what everyone is looking for on the board. And then shuffle up the spell deck and deal 3 cards to each player, keeping the rest of the deck face down. Lay out the monster cards near the board, and then place all the monsters with those cards. Now that the board is set up and ready to go, it's time to start playing. However, it's important to keep in mind what your end goal is. First, you must keep your princess alive if you want to have any hope of winning. The princess is going to have to retrieve whichever manuscript that player is looking for. Retrieving the manuscript is the first part of your win condition. The second part of your win condition is to have the most gems at the end. In the floor plan for this two-player game, it indicates that this is entrance 1 and this is entrance 2. At this point, you'll roll a 6-sided die to determine which entrance you'll be playing from. Either player can start the roll. In a two-player game, obviously, only one player is going to have to roll. And you can choose, obviously, you could get a 3, 4, 5, or 6, which is not either of these entrances. Beforehand, determine how you want to do that. Perhaps 1 through 3 will be this one, 4, 5, 6 over there, odd numbers, even numbers, or you just have to re-roll. So in this case, we'll say that the second player rolled the 6, and so they're going to be coming from this entrance over here, and the first player will come from entrance number 1 over here. Once you determine which door each player is going to use, the player at door 1 will be first player, the player at door 2, second player, and if you have further players, door 3 will be third player, and so on. So be sure to keep this in mind as you begin the game. The rulebook does mention that you can set a timer if you wish, and it recommends 30 minutes per player. If you do set a timer, then when the timer goes off, the player currently taking their turn will finish their turn, at which point the game will be over. At the start of your turn, you'll receive the decision dice. If you have a spell with an extended effect that's using a die to count down, you will roll that down to the next number. If at the beginning of your turn the die rolls all the way down to 1, then at the end of your turn that spell will expire. The first thing you'll do in your turn is move your search party. The warrior can move up to 6 spaces, the princess up to 5, and the wizard up to 5. Knowing that the warrior moves 6 spaces, the first player can come in starting at the entrance door. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You may not move diagonal like that. You must always move orthogonal. If on your turn you manage to acquire a jewel or a manuscript, that movement turn is over immediately for that character. If you were playing a game where there were multiple board tiles out, if you entered one new one during that turn, you would not also be able to enter another new one that same turn. You may not move through a character piece. Instead, you always have to move around any character piece that you want to get around. However, you are allowed to move through spaces that have manuscripts, jewels, or the wizard square. On that same note, if this player was not in fact looking for the science manuscript, they would be allowed to move through the space. However, they could not in their turn occupying the space. This same rule applies for the wizard square. Only wizards can occupy the space when they finish their movement. All other players would have to move through it, but not occupy it. In a situation where you're moving through an area with multiple levels like this, you must move up each level one at a time. You cannot skip a level, for instance, going from here to here. Once players are on the board, if they're not trying to exit in order to finish the game, all doors on the side are actually called crossover doors. So in this case, the warrior could actually go out the door he came in and end up at this door. Every crossover door wraps around to the door on the complete opposite side of the board. So this door goes here, or if the warrior was here, he'd exit this way and show up right there. Keeping that in mind, it is possible to block a crossover door. For instance, if this princess was right here and this warrior wanted to go out the door here, he wouldn't be able to because he would be coming into the space with a character, and as we covered earlier, you cannot move through a space with another character. Once your party finishes their movement, if during that turn they entered a board they were not on previously during that turn, then you're going to roll for a monster. So let's say this is the end of their first movement for this party. You're going to roll the red, yellow, and black 8-sided die. And so we got a black 3, where'd that go? There it is. A yellow 4, and a red 6. Now the red die actually matches up with a monster. So in this case, you can see here, right there, the red 6 gives you a werewolf. So you're going to take the werewolf and then use these die to place it, as I showed you earlier with the manuscripts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. This is where the werewolf will start on this space right here. Now, had we rolled in such a way that would make the monster show up on an occupied space, you would simply re-roll for the location only. However, that is the monster that's showing up. Once the monster is on the board, the active player will give this monster card to the player on his right, as that's the player that will be controlling the monster. Only one monster of each type is allowed on the board at any given time. So if a player on this tile over here rolled a red 6, the werewolf would actually be transported from wherever it is over here to this board instead and be placed according to the red and yellow dice. After you've moved your search party and rolled up any monsters that you needed to roll onto your board, then it's your turn to move any monsters you control. So if you controlled this werewolf, you can see it has move 5, that's when you'll be able to move the werewolf. So let's say it's player 2's turn, and it's his turn to move the werewolf because he's already moved his search party. And he would move it 1, 2, 3, 4, right up. Well, actually 5. He'd probably go for the princess in that case. After you've moved your search party and rolled up any monsters and then moved any monsters that you control, what you're going to do is have the opportunity to battle with both your search party and monsters you control. So in this case, let's say player 1 controls this minotaur that's over here next to the search party of player 2. Meanwhile, player 1 search party is next to this orc over here. Every character has a die they use for battle. In the case of the warrior, he uses an 8-sided die. And in the case of this orc, he uses a 10-sided die. A player can only attack a piece that is adjacent to him, and adjacent means orthogonal. You cannot attack diagonally. You also are not allowed to attack through doorways, for instance, right here, or through a crossover door. When you do choose to battle, you can only battle one piece per turn. However, you will battle until either your piece or the piece you're attacking is defeated. Player pieces are allowed to battle up or down one level, but not more. Once the decision has been made to attack another player, first any defensive spells must be cast, if they're going to be cast, and then the players will roll whatever their particular battle dice are. In this case, we'll say that the warrior is attacking this orc. The orc has the 10-sided die, and the warrior has the 8. And here you can see we have a 6 on the green die and a 3 on the red. The winner of the battle is whoever has the higher number. In this case, the orc has 1. You subtract 3 from the 6. That leaves 3 points, which means the warrior has just taken 3 points of damage. The warrior starts with 5 health, so you can see that battling monsters can be a very dangerous proposition. And in fact, you may want to find better ways to deal with monsters than engaging in melee combat. Once a character's life is reduced to 0, that character is removed from the board, and the winner gains any jewels that that particular character had collected during the game. The winner of the battle also gains 1 life on their lifeline. As life is gained and lost, you can mark it here on the lifeline provided on this with the included marker, or you can keep track of it in whatever way you feel is easiest. A couple of rule exceptions when it comes to how battles are conducted. The red dragon will destroy any creature that is adjacent to it at the end of its turn. And because of that, it can be battled from 2 spaces away. So if the dragon were here, a character would need to be here to battle it, because if instead the princess were here, she would be destroyed immediately. The Grim Reaper also has different rules for combat. He cannot be killed by any of the characters on the board. Instead, when the Grim Reaper attacks, he rolls a 12-sided die. If he rolls a 1 to 5, then nothing happens. If he rolls a 6 to 11, then the character he's attacking dies immediately. On the other hand, if he lands a 12, then the Grim Reaper is destroyed for the rest of the game. After you finish the attack phase of your turn, and you're done attacking with both your search party and any monsters you control, Then you'll pass the decision dice to the left, clockwise around the table, for the next player to play. Keep in mind that there is no particular time for you to use spells during your turn. They can be used at any point during your turn other than the middle of a combat phase. You must resolve combat once those dice have been rolled. Keep in mind that battles do not have to occur only between a search party member and a monster. You are also allowed to attack monsters that you control and the characters of another player. Now, a big part of the game is obviously going to be acquiring the manuscript you're looking for. Let's say player 1 has the science manuscript card, which means they're looking for this manuscript here. Just happened to be on the same board tile that they started on. The way they do that is they're going to want to get their princess all the way down to the space with the manuscript. If she finishes her turn on the manuscript, then she's able to acquire it simply by being on that space. Once she's taken possession of it, that turn for her is over. She can't do anything else as far as movement goes. Only the princess is capable of acquiring the manuscript you're looking for. So what that means is if she dies, it's impossible for you to win the game. However, you are not eliminated from the game, as instead you can use your remaining characters to try to prevent the other player from winning as well. That way the game's a wash. Ultimately, the way you're going to win the game is by having the most jewels of any player to get their princess with the manuscript off the board. Any character is able to move onto a space with a jewel and then acquire it. If you do acquire a jewel, your movement is over for that turn. Keep in mind, you're not required to acquire any jewels you land on. You are allowed to simply move through them if you wish. Players can use monsters to acquire jewels to prevent the other player from getting that jewel. And then the only way to acquire it will be to kill the monster who got it. If a monster that has jewels is summoned to a different board because of a die roll, he takes those jewels with him. Every player has a maximum hand limit when it comes to spells of 3 cards. If you run out of spells, this is a spot where you can get more. The wizard is the only player that can occupy this space. If he occupies this space, then at the end of his movement, he draws up to his hand limit of 3. On his next turn, the wizard is required to move from the space. That way he doesn't block the space from other wizards. All pieces can move through this space, but only the wizard can end his movement on it. Certain cards, such as the Lightning Bolt and Blow Dart, are attacks that have no defense against them. These cards must be used only on the tile you're on, the board tile. They cannot be used through doorways, whether it's a regular doorway like this or a crossover doorway like this one over here. When you use one of these cards, first you must declare your target and then roll the die as indicated on that card. The value of the roll is subtracted directly from the lifeline of the wounded piece. There is no defense, which makes them incredibly powerful sometimes. If a player piece is killed in this way, the attacker gains its jewels and 1 lifeline, just like they would during battle. Only the wizard piece may use the spell cards that you have in your hand. A wizard spell is cast only on the board the wizard currently occupies and cannot be cast from one board to another. Spell cards can be used at any time during a player's turn, not during battle. And defensive spells can be used when a search party is being attacked but must be declared prior to rolling the defense die. Only 1 spell card can be used per turn. And remember, for spells that last a specific number of turns, use a counting die to count down each turn until you get to 1. On the turn where the die rolls to 1, the spell will expire at the end of that turn. Any of your characters can attempt to exit the board at any point during the game, whether or not a manuscript has been acquired. When they attempt to exit the board, it must be through one of the entrances that was originally used, but it does not have to be the entrance that they used to come in. So for instance, if this team came in through this entrance, they could exit over here if that one was more advantageous. When a piece is getting ready to leave the board, make sure you let players know that this piece is now leaving the board and how many jewels that particular piece has control of. Once a piece has exited, they are no longer allowed to come back on the board at any time. The game ends once all of the player pieces, all the character pieces, have either exited the board or been eliminated. You then check to see which princesses managed to exit the board with a manuscript, and of those players, you then count how many jewels they have. The player with the highest number of jewels wins the game. So there you have it. That is how to play Manuscript, the board game. One additional rule that I didn't quite mention during the video itself: when you're moving a monster is never allowed to move off of the board that it's currently on, off the tile that it's currently on. The only way that can happen is if you have some sort of spell or effect that lets it do that, or if the monster is rolled up onto another board with the red 8-sided die. So I hope you enjoyed the rules video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. You can find me on BGG. We have a guild on BGG. Be sure to look us up there. I'm on Twitter at boredoffline. I'm on Board Game Blender every other week or so. And until next time, if you're bored online, board offline.